A lost blueprint, a buried secret, and one man knows. Welcome to Sayers and Secrets. My name is Samuel Drake, and I'm your host. Tell us where you're tuned in. I read every place with interest. I'm glad you're here. This story wouldn't be the same without you. Now the case begins. It was a Tuesday, which is generally a safe day at the brownstone. There were no deliveries of orchids. There were no invoices that were past due. Fritz had no clients who were desperate enough to breach his polite barrier at the front door. Wolfe had declared the afternoon sacred for the fourth repotting cycle of his dendrobium hybrids, and I was working on the office accounts with all the enthusiasm of a man reading his own dental chart. That peace, of course, didn't last. It never does. The doorbell rang at exactly 3:07 p.m. I let it buzz once more before heading to the door. Not because I enjoy suspense, but because I figured whoever had the gall to interrupt a midweek orchid session better have something special. I opened the door to a woman in her mid-30s, sharply dressed, with a portfolio under one arm and a look on her face like she'd already run 3 different scenarios, and none of them ended in comfort. Her hair was pinned back in an efficient twist, and her eyes, grey, precise, and a little sleepless, went straight past me to the inside of the house like she was casing it. "Nero Wolfe?" she asked. "He lives here," I said. "He's not currently seeing visitors, unless they have root rot." "I'm down tomorrow," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "I'm an architect, and someone just tried to kill my father. But I'm not sure who or why, only that it has something to do with one of his designs, and I think I've brought the wrong one." That made me blink. I shut the door behind her. "You'll have to be more specific. Attempted murder is usually enough to hold a conversation on its own." She clutched the portfolio tighter. "There's a plan in here, an architectural draft from a project my father sketched in the 90s, before he retired. It was tucked into one of his active files. No one was supposed to see it, and yet, someone has. Wait here." I buzzed the plant room. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "we have a woman here claiming someone tried to kill her father over a building sketch. She says it's tied to something her father designed 30 years ago, and she might have brought the wrong blueprint." Silence, then a sigh. "Bring her," he said. We entered the office. Wolfe was still in his gardening gear but seated behind his desk like he'd never left. Dana Morrow didn't flinch under the weight of his gaze, which scored her a few points before she said a word. "State it plainly," Wolfe said. "My father, Bernard Morrow, was pushed down the stairs at our firm 3 days ago. He's in recovery now, but it wasn't an accident. He was holding this when it happened." She placed the portfolio on Wolfe's desk. He didn't touch it. "It's a rough drawing from his archives. A hotel project, never built, never filed, and yet someone wanted it badly enough to hurt him. Why? I don't know. That's what I need you to figure out." Wolfe stared at her for a long moment. "Miss Morrow, I do not typically concern myself with blueprints, permits, or the cutthroat habits of commercial developers. If your father was attacked because of financial competition, I suggest you retain a lawyer, or perhaps a bodyguard. It's not just competition," she said. "There's something hidden in the drawing, a code, a sequence he embedded in the framework, something only he would recognize. We think it was meant for someone specific, a message hidden in steel and stone." Now that got Wolfe's attention. "A code," he repeated. "Yes, and whatever it is, it's worth enough to try killing him for it." He didn't even remember the design until he saw it again. He said he created it during a private commission he walked away from. The client was anonymous, paid in cash, told him to forget it. Did he? Not quite. He made a copy and kept it in his files, and now he's in a hospital. Dana nodded. "And the drawing? I think the real one was stolen last week and replaced with a fake. I found an inconsistency, a line that curves where my father never curves." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Miss Morrow, you are telling me someone embedded a code in a decades-old architectural design, and someone else noticed and attempted to eliminate the person who once drew it?" "Yes." "And you are unsure whether the plan you brought is real or fabricated?" "Yes." He opened his eyes and turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, have it examined." I took the portfolio and opened it. Inside were 3 pages, hand-drawn, yellowed slightly at the edges, with notations in pencil and pen. They looked ordinary to me. A lobby layout, elevator shafts, and ventilation routes. The only oddity was a sequence of numbered rectangles tucked into a support beam diagram. It looked too deliberate. "This," Wolfe said, "will not be solved with ink. It will be solved with understanding motive." He turned back to Dana, who had access to this file. 5 people, myself, my assistant, my father's former partner, Gregory Hasse, our building manager, Randall Pike, and our newest hire, Ren Chen. "There it is," Wolfe said, "your circle of suspects. And my father," she added quietly. "I'm not even sure he didn't plant the switch himself. He's hiding something." That got a sideways glance from me. "Are you suggesting your father is staging his own attempted murder?" "I don't know," she said, "but he's a man who designed safe rooms into his summer cottage. He doesn't always play fair." Wolfe sighed. "This will require interviews, observations, and an examination of your father, his memory, his motives, and his enemies." "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes, sir. You will begin tomorrow. Speak to these 5, report back in the evening." Dana stood. "You'll take the case." "I already have," Wolfe said, "because a blueprint with a code is curiosity, but a blueprint with a history, that is intrigue." She nodded once and left. When the door shut, Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. "This," he murmured, "may be interesting." I folded the drawings back into the portfolio. "I'll say this," I told him. "You know it's going to be a weird week, when the most dangerous thing in the office isn't a client. It's a lobby sketch with a secret message." Wolfe didn't respond, but I could tell he was listening. The next morning began the way most do at the brownstone, quiet, punctual, and humming with the kind of order that only Nero Wolfe and Fritz Brenner can maintain without speaking to each other before noon. I was halfway through coffee number 2, and reading the last page of the Gazette when Wolfe buzzed from upstairs. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes, sir." "Bring the portfolio to the office." A moment later, I had the long black folder open on the desk, while Wolfe leaned back in his chair, and regarded it like it might hatch something uninvited. He hadn't touched it since Dana Morrow left the day before, but you could tell it had been weighing on him. The corners of his blotter were squared, his pen tray was aligned, and the dictionary had been moved half an inch closer to the edge than usual. For Wolfe, that's the equivalent of pacing. He pointed at the drawings. "Describe again what she said about the code." "She believes her father embedded something into the plans, some kind of message hidden in the original architectural sketch. The version she brought might be a fake, swapped in by someone who wants the original. She said one detail was off, a curved line where it should have been straight." Wolfe closed his eyes and let the information settle like soup. "You will take the drawings to Mr. Harrow." That got a reaction out of me. "The blueprint guy?" "Yes." Miles Harrow was a detail specialist, an architectural consultant Wolfe occasionally employed when something structural turned up in a case. He could look at a building plan and tell you how many times the person drawing it sneezed while sketching the plumbing. "You believe Miss Morrow's claim?" "I believe," Wolfe said, "that a man was pushed down a flight of stairs, and that requires attention." "Fair enough." I left the brownstone with the portfolio under my arm, and a list of names from Dana in my notebook. The suspects: Gregory Hasse, the former business partner, Randall Pike, the building manager, Ren Chen, the newest addition to the firm, the assistant whose name was Simone Kendrick, and finally, Dana herself, whom Wolfe didn't count out, not yet. While Harrow examined the sketches in his little shop on the east side, among stacks of drafting tools, and a model of the Flatiron building made entirely from toothpicks, I took a cab to Morrow and Hasse Associates. Their offices were tucked into the upper floor of a pre-war building on East 46th, with long narrow hallways, and that too quiet hum you get in buildings, where nobody laughs out loud unless they've just signed a contract. Dana met me at the front. She'd changed into a dark green suit, and had that half-alert look again, like she was waiting for someone to hand her a bomb disguised as a coffee order. "I told them you'd be stopping by," she said. "I told them you were doing due diligence on the drawing. I didn't mention Nero Wolfe by name." "Appreciated," I said. "Any of them ask why now?" She gave a half-smile. "Only Gregory." "Then I'll start with him." Gregory Hasse had an office at the far end, framed by 2 floor-to-ceiling windows, and filled with miniature models of things that hadn't been built. He had a sculptor's beard, and a designer's haircut, but his handshake was soft and a little damp. "You're with the inquiry?" he asked, when I introduced myself. "I'm assisting Miss Morrow in determining if the drawing that was stolen, if one was stolen, is the one that caused the attack on her father." Hasse leaned back. "Bernard's accident was unfortunate, but Dana's reaching. We've had a long career with sensitive clients and private commissions. Nothing criminal ever came out of it, except someone tried to kill your partner." His face darkened just a shade. "He hasn't been my partner in 10 years. Still, any idea why someone would want that specific old design?" "No, it's one of a dozen lost projects. He used to sketch things, and then hide them. Some personal tick. I only saw the hotel draft once." "Describe it." He gave a shrug. "A circular lobby, twin elevators, double staircases, and a mezzanine with a skylight. Stylish but obsolete. Would have been a maintenance nightmare. Dana thinks there's a code in it." "That's nonsense," he said too quickly. "So you're sure?" He looked out the window. "I'm sure it's nonsense." That was interesting. I made my rounds next. Simone Kendrick, Dana's assistant, had a smile you could balance a budget on. She offered me tea, which I politely declined, and answered questions in short, smart bursts. "Yes, I've seen the design." "No, I didn't handle it personally. Dana brought it in from her father's storage. It stayed in her office." "You didn't notice it missing?" "Not until she mentioned it. She thought it had been tampered with." "Would she tell you if it had?" Simone paused. "Maybe, maybe not. She trusts me. But this is personal," which meant Simone knew more than she was saying, but hadn't decided who she was loyal to yet. Next, I found Ren Chen hunched over a drafting table, headphones in, eyes narrowed, early 30s, slick hair, pressed shirt. A surgical architect, the kind who didn't just design clean lines, he lived inside them. "Hey," he said, pulling out one earbud. "You're Dana's guy." "Today I am. You want to know if I touched the drawing?" "I didn't." "Who do you think did it?" He shrugged. "This place is full of secrets. Half of them are old client projects Hasse won't even talk about. The other half are in Bernard's notebooks. He kept everything, on paper. Do you think someone wanted him dead? Not unless they knew what he was keeping." That wasn't a denial. I thanked him, and made one last stop. Randall Pike, the building manager. Pike wasn't a designer. He was a logistics man, thin, sharp, and wore beige like it was a brand. He didn't like my questions, especially the one about who could have accessed the locked cabinet, where Dana said the original sketch had been kept. "Everyone has keys," he said, "but no one uses them without a log. Logs can be edited." He didn't answer. I filed him under watch closely. By 6 o'clock I was back at the brownstone. Wolfe was seated, hands folded. "Well," he said, "Hasse thinks Dana's overreacting. Kendrick's cautious. Chen's interested but distant. Pike's cagey. And Dana, still playing cards close. And the drawings." I placed Harrow's report on Wolfe's desk. "It's a copy," I said. Harrow confirmed it. "A very good one, probably traced from the original, but one element, the support column, doesn't match Bernard's drafting style. It curves, which means," Wolfe said, "the real plan is missing, and someone still has it." "Indeed." He tapped the report once with a thick finger. "Mr. Goodwin, this will get unpleasant." "How so?" "Because we are no longer determining whether a theft occurred. We are determining who is prepared to kill for what they believe is still inside that design." I glanced down at the plan. just ink and pencil. But Wolfe was right. Someone had already pushed a man down a flight of stairs over it, which meant the next step might not be survival. And the brownstone, it had just been officially disturbed. If you ask Nero Wolfe, everyone's a suspect, until they've proven themselves beneath notice. He doesn't warm up to innocence. It's too uncooperative. So once we confirmed the drawing in the portfolio was a forgery, clean, convincing and missing the one straight line that started this whole mess, he moved into position like a spider checking which strand of the web just twitched. That meant each of the 5 people on Dan Amoro's list was now seated squarely on Wolfe's imaginary game board, and I was the knight with sneakers and a notepad. We began, as always, by establishing their proximity to motive. Wolfe's theory, early and unspoken but practically carved into the air, was that the blueprint itself wasn't valuable in a traditional sense. It was what it pointed to, or unlocked, that mattered. A design with an embedded code didn't trigger violence unless that code led to something real: money, access, legacy, or maybe just leverage. The morning after my first round of interviews, Wolfe had me assemble their files, whatever I could dig up. With Saul Panzer's help, I had dossiers ready on all 5 within 24 hours. Wolfe perused them in silence, while Fritz pruned thyme on the terrace. I sat across from him, watching the minute twitch in his left eyebrow. When something in the reading displeased him, it twitched 4 times. "Begin with Hasse," he said, placing the folder down. Gregory Hasse, 57, original partner in Morrow and Hasse, known to have a professional falling out with Bernard Morrow about 10 years ago, supposedly over a development deal in Buenos Aires. Bernard backed out. Hasse stayed in the business, owns controlling interest in the firm's current commercial contracts. Money isn't tight, but his reputation took a hit after a failed stadium design last year. Wolfe nodded slowly, and he knew the drawing existed. Claims he saw it once, downplays its value. But he shut that door a little too fast. Wolfe closed his eyes. He is protective of his standing, which means he's not afraid of the drawing's content. He's afraid of what it might say about his past. Next, Simone Kendrick, 33, office administrator and assistant to Dana, clean record, used to work for a boutique law firm in Midtown. She transferred to the architecture firm 4 years ago when her firm downsized. Smart, efficient. She handles the filing system and access logs. If the original drawing was removed quietly, she either saw it or made it look like she didn't. Was she aware of its significance? She says no, but she's good at compartmentalizing. She could have filed war plans without blinking. Wolfe grunted. That could have meant anything between mildly interesting and highly suspicious. Next, Ren Chen, 35, young hotshot designer, educated at Yale, interned with a major Tokyo firm, recruited 6 months ago, no known financial problems, no criminal record, not particularly social, works late, keeps to himself. Dana was the one who brought him in. Ambition, high octane, I said. The kind that could torch a bridge if it stood between him and the next floor plan. Would he kill? Maybe. If the building had a rooftop lounge. Wolfe made a sound that might have been amusement. Pike, Randall Pike, building manager, former contractor, served a brief suspension in 2004 for improper permit approvals. Since then, mostly clean. Handles access to the firm's physical archive. The cabinet with the original sketch was supposedly logged and locked. Pike maintains it hasn't been opened by unauthorized staff. And you believe him? I believe Pike would lie about taking the last donut, if it meant avoiding paperwork. Noted. Finally, Dana herself, 38, architect, inherited her father's obsession with structure, but not his secrecy. No known debts, no major personal scandals. She's respected in the field, but still living in Bernard's professional shadow. When she found the sketch, she says she had it pulled from the cabinet and left it in her office overnight. The switch happened sometime before she brought it here. Wolfe opened his eyes, and she believes the code in the original has significance, enough to provoke violence. He tapped a finger on the edge of the blotter. Then one of the others does too. I nodded. So how do you want to play it? Wolfe sighed. Invite them, one at a time, not to confess, to contradict. That I can do. The calls went out that afternoon. I didn't mention Wolfe's name to anyone but Dana. The rest got the standard line. Private investigation, review of building materials, need for clarification. By some miracle, or maybe just the lingering shadow of a man shoved down a flight of stairs, they all agreed to come. The first to arrive the next morning was Simone Kendrick. She came in precisely at 9:15, carrying a sleek leather folder and a look that said she had already budgeted exactly 20 minutes for whatever we wanted. I guided her into the office. Wolfe didn't rise, naturally. He motioned to the red chair. Miss Kendrick, he said. You are aware of the switch? Yes, she said. Dana showed me the discrepancy in the line curvature. We've since sealed the cabinet and reviewed our logs, and nothing unusual, but that doesn't mean much. Wolfe tilted his head. Are you protective of Miss Morrow? She's my employer and a friend. Would you protect her if she had fabricated the switch? Simone didn't even blink. She didn't, because I was there when she found it. She didn't fake her shock. Wolfe grunted. You are confident in your records. I am. Then someone altered them. Simone looked uncomfortable. That's possible. Wolfe waved a hand. That's all. Thank you. She left. 10 minutes later, Gregory Huss arrived. He didn't sit right away. He wandered to the window and stared out at the sycamores. I hope you're not going to tell me Bernard planted this stunt for attention, he said. He doesn't need attention. He needs rest. No, Wolfe said. I believe the danger is real, and I believe you know more about the original design than you've said. Huss turned. I saw it once. That's all. You called it obsolete. It is. And yet someone attempted to kill for it. Then they're a fool, or they know something you don't. Huss narrowed his eyes. Let me be clear, he said. If that plan contains anything of value, it wasn't from me. Bernard did things I didn't agree with. Took jobs from people who didn't want their names attached to the plans. One of those may be the skeleton you're looking for. Can you name them? No, he said. Because Bernard never told me. But one of them had very expensive shoes, and asked for all drafts to be delivered to a P.O. box in Albany. Now we were getting somewhere. Would you recognize the name? No, but I might recognize the handwriting. Wolfe looked at me. I nodded. I escorted Huss out, and 30 minutes later, Ren Chen walked in. He didn't look nervous, just bored, until Wolfe asked the third question. Mr. Chen, Wolfe said. Do you believe the original drawing contains a key to something more? Yes, Chen said. I do. That stopped the air in the room cold. Explain, Wolfe said. Chen shrugged. It's more than layout. It's language. That plan used a sequence Bernard wrote about in an old design journal, one he kept in his home library. I read it once when I was interning at another firm. I recognized the structure. He called it the framing cipher, a way to embed geometric logic into architectural forms. And what does it unlock? Whatever you want, he said. It depends who's holding the key. We let him go. Wolfe didn't speak again until the office door shut. Well, I said. We have motive now. Maybe more than one. No, Wolfe said. We have an understanding, which leaves the next trespass. I raised an eyebrow. You're expecting one? Yes, he said. Because they know we're looking. He leaned back and steepled his fingers. And someone, Mr. Goodwin, is about to panic. When Wolfe announces someone's about to panic, it doesn't mean they're going to run down Fifth Avenue waving their arms and confessing into traffic. It means that person will make a move. Sudden, poorly timed, and most likely subtle enough to look like nothing to the untrained eye. Fortunately for Wolfe, he has me. and I've made a career out of watching people do exactly that. The next day was a Thursday, overcast, the kind of weather that makes a man check his pockets twice and step a little lighter on marble lobbies. Wolfe had instructed me to stay close to the suspects, particularly Ren Chen and Gregory Huss. They are not guilty of the same crime, he said, but they are guilty of concealing the same truth. I started with Chen. He kept an apartment in a sleek building on 2nd Avenue, one of those mid-rise blocks with coded entry, and a lobby that smelled like lemon wax and promotional success. He emerged at 8:23 am. Mr. Sharp, briefcase in one hand, phone already in the other. I tailed him on foot to the firm, where he entered without looking back. No tail himself, no signs of nerves, but at exactly 10:17, he came back out, alone. Now that was interesting. He walked west. I followed at a distance, ducking behind scaffolding and awnings. He didn't pause for coffee, and didn't check his phone. He moved like he was on an errand. He didn't want to explain. At East 41st, he stepped into an unmarked door beside a locksmith's shop. I gave it a few beats, then slipped in after him. Inside was a narrow stairwell leading up to a second-floor office with no visible signage, just a name on frosted glass. G. Muller. Technical drafting and document reproduction. I waited outside in the vestibule. 5 minutes past 10. At 15, Chen came out with a large envelope tucked under one arm. He looked relieved, not nervous, relieved, like something had been deposited safely into a vault. I gave him time to clear the block, then stepped up and knocked. The man who answered, late 50s, thick glasses, and the kind of posture that suggested 20 years hunched over blueprints, was all business. Help you? He asked. I'm looking for a last-minute rush job. One of my clients may need reproduction of hand-drawn schematics, large scale. He blinked. Sure. What format? Old architectural paper, pencil and ink, originals, possibly with annotations. Gotcha. Do you want blueprint duplication or digital scans? Depends, I said. How about the guy who was just here? What he asked for? He narrowed his eyes. I don't give client details. I nodded. Didn't expect you to. Just curious if he looked nervous. The man stared at me for a second longer than normal, then shrugged. No, he looked like someone who just got rid of something he didn't want to carry anymore. That was enough for me. I returned to the brownstone by 1 o'clock. Wolfe was just finishing lunch, and Fritz had the office door cracked, letting out the smell of thyme and butter. Well? Wolfe asked. Ren Chen visited a private drafting office this morning, left with a sealed envelope. No one else was involved. I bet my shoes he handed off something related to the original sketch, or a version of it. Indeed. He's distancing himself. No, Wolfe said. He's trying to protect something. I raised an eyebrow. From whom? That remains to be seen. What of Huss? Working late tonight, according to Simone. She sent me his schedule. Also, she's not happy that Chen left the office mid-morning without logging it. Good, Wolfe said. Let friction bloom. That was Wolfe's version of turning up the heat. By 5 o'clock, I was back at the firm. This time I waited in the car parked across the street. Around 6:10, Huss exited with a long coat, a portfolio case, and a look on his face that suggested he hadn't enjoyed his day. Instead of heading home, he turned north, walked 5 blocks, entered an old coffee shop called Tilden's, booth seating, brass lighting, the kind of place where no one talks loud, and everyone has a folded newspaper. He sat across from a woman I hadn't seen before. Mid-40s, neat grey coat, no jewelry. The conversation was brief, no more than 7 minutes. She handed him something, a small manila envelope. Huss nodded once, left. I snapped a few shots from the corner booth, then followed at a distance. He went straight home, an older brick building in Murray Hill. Inside, lights on, curtains closed. I reported back, described the woman,
Wolfe said. I did. She handed him an envelope. I added. Yes, Wolfe murmured. Not the first time, I suspect. You think she's a fixer? No, Wolfe said. She's the client. The one Bernard designed the sketch for. I paused. But the commission was 30 years ago. Indeed. And now someone's decided the structure in that sketch, a hotel never built, is no longer dormant. Something is happening, Mr. Goodwin. Something planned long ago is moving again. That's when the doorbell rang. Fritz answered. A minute later, Dana was in the office. She held something in her hand, a torn envelope. Her face was pale. This came to the office this morning, she said. No return address. She handed Wolfe a folded letter. It was typed. No signature. Short, precise. Stop asking questions. The drawing is gone. Let it die, or someone else will. Wolfe read it twice. Miss Morrow, he said. Have you received threats before? Never. This was delivered today. Yes. Simone found it in our mail pile. She didn't open it. Have you shown it to anyone else? No. Good. He folded it carefully and handed it to me. Secure that, he said. We are now in possession of both motive and escalation. You think someone's planning another move? No, Wolfe said. They've already made it. This letter is not a warning. It's a postscript. They believe they've won. Then they're underestimating you. Of course, Wolfe said dryly. Everyone does, until they don't. He turned to Dana. You will not respond to this note. You will not mention it to anyone in your office. Not Simone, not Huss, not Mr. Chen. She nodded. What do I do instead? You will return tomorrow, and you will bring your father. She looked startled. You want to speak with him? Yes. You think he remembers more than he says? I think, Wolfe said. He remembers exactly what he chose to forget. And now that his design is in play again, he will not be able to ignore it. I led her out and returned to the office. Wolfe was silent for a long time. Then Mr. Goodwin. Yes, sir. Tomorrow we begin extraction. From whom? From everyone, Wolfe said. The truth is buried in old cement. We are about to drill. The room was quiet again, and somewhere out there, someone who had waited 30 years to activate a forgotten blueprint was starting to realize. Nero Wolfe had noticed. It was sometime around 7 o'clock the next morning when I noticed something. That was sometime around 7 o'clock the next morning when I noticed something that didn't belong in the kitchen.
That's saying a lot, because Fritz doesn't leave things out, ever. If you were to accuse him of carelessness with a spice jar, I'd recommend bringing your lawyer and bodyguard. But there it was. A small scrap of paper was tucked into the back of the bottom drawer, where Fritz keeps his specialty blades that he uses exclusively for trussing pheasant or julienning with surgical precision. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't gone in for coffee filters. It wasn't folded. It wasn't even stained. Just a clean 3x3 square of creamy notepaper with a few symbols drawn in pencil, 3 rectangles, 2 straight lines, a dot at the center of the middle rectangle. I brought it straight to Wolfe, who hadn't yet come down for breakfast. He was in the plant rooms, checking the humidity around his cymbidiums like an orchestra conductor preparing for a string solo. When he saw the slip, he took it in one hand and stared at it longer than I expected. This, he said, is a message. Well, it's not a dinner order. No, it's a replica, a fragment of the design. I looked at it again. You think it was copied from the original drawing? Yes, Wolfe said, and left here. For us. By whom? Someone who wants us to have it, but not all of it. That narrowed the list. Wolfe doesn't tolerate trespass lightly, especially not in his kitchen. Whoever left it knew how to enter quietly, leave no trace, and get out without Fritz or me noticing. That took timing. It also took guts. Wolfe buzzed Fritz and asked him to check every drawer and cabinet in the kitchen, top to bottom. I want to know if anything at all has been moved or touched, he said. Fritz, to his credit, Didn't ask questions. He was gone 5 minutes and came back holding a small tin nutmeg, part of a custom import. The lid was half a turn loose, he said. I never leave it that way. Wolfe took the tin, opened it, and sniffed. It's been tampered with, he said. Not replaced, merely opened. What are they trying to say? I asked. That we are being watched and guided. That afternoon Dana returned. This time she brought her father. Bernard Morrow looked older than I expected, gaunt but composed, with eyes that still carried the geometry of a younger man. His hands trembled slightly as he shook Wolfe's hand, but he didn't falter when he sat. Dana hovered near the doorway like a bodyguard in heels. I remember the hotel design, Bernard said without waiting to be asked, but I didn't expect it to surface again. You kept a copy, Wolfe said. Why? Because the man who commissioned it paid me in cash and refused to give his name. That made me curious. I made a duplicate, a habit I had back then. For my own records, I didn't show it to anyone. Until recently, I forgot about it, Bernard said. Genuinely. I rediscovered it while cleaning out old plans, gave it to Dana, thinking nothing of it. Then someone pushed me down a staircase. Dana flinched at that. Why did you accept the job originally? Wolfe asked. I needed the money. I was younger and ambitious. The client was clear, design the outer shell only. No internal layout, no structural engineering. Just a lobby, a facade, and something distinctive. Did you know what it was for? No. But I suspected it wasn't a real hotel. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then what? Some kind of shell company. A front. For what I don't know, but the location was specific. A plot in Queens near the waterfront. It was never developed, but the design, they wanted it to appear feasible. Enough for a permit. Did you file one? No. The client took the drafts and left. I never saw him again. And now, Wolfe said, someone has removed the original and replaced it with a replica. Bernard nodded. Someone who knows it wasn't just a drawing. It was a signal. To whom? That's the question. Wolfe paused, then asked, is there anyone alive who might have seen your copy? A partner? A colleague? Bernard hesitated. Gregory might have. I left it out once. He never admitted it, but he might have taken a mental photograph. Dana stepped forward. You think he's involved? I think Gregory has always had an uncanny memory for things he pretends not to care about. Why keep quiet? Wolfe asked. I thought I was being paranoid. That, Wolfe said, would have been forgivable. But you let your daughter bring the drawing to me without warning her of what it contained. I didn't know the replica had been swapped until she showed it to me here. By then it was too late. Wolfe leaned back. That drawing was not just a shell, he said. It was a cipher, a geographic and structural code. Someone saw it then, and someone sees it now. Dana handed Wolfe another envelope. This came today, she said. No note, just this. Inside was a photograph, a scan of the original design. Wolfe held it up. It was marked with a circle around one portion of the layout, 3 pillars, 2 lines, and 1 dot. The same shape from the note in the kitchen. They're taunting you, I said. No, Wolfe replied. They're warning me. Someone's about to use the structure that drawing concealed. Whether to build it, exploit it, or erase its footprint, something is being activated. He turned to Bernard. Mr. Morrow, you designed it. Where was the code hidden? In the beam spacing, Bernard said. A rhythm in the vertical supports. They follow a Fibonacci sequence, but one of them deviates. That deviation is the key. Wolfe nodded. To what? Bernard looked down. A vault. Where I don't know. I only designed the entry. Dana sat beside him. You think it's real? I know it is, Bernard said. The man who hired me asked me one question before he paid. He said, can a building lie? Wolfe's voice dropped. "And what did you say?" I said. "Only if you teach it how." That was enough. Wolfe stood an event in itself, and walked slowly to the window. "We are not looking for a killer," he said. "We are looking for a resurrection, something buried, that someone intends to bring back. The drawing is not the goal, it's the trigger." He turned back to Bernard. "And you, sir, just heard the click. That night, I checked the locks on the brownstone twice." Fritz swept the kitchen again. Wolfe stayed up past his usual hour, seated in the office, reviewing copies of the sketch and marking it with notations of his own. We were no longer playing a guessing game. We were following a line, and somewhere at the end of it, the building was waiting. But not the one Bernard had designed. The one someone was about to dig up. You could feel it in the air the next morning. The way pressure settles in just before a thunderstorm. Not loud, not obvious. Just a quiet weight, as if every chair in the brownstone had gained a few ounces overnight. Wolfe noticed it before I did. He always does, and when he's unsettled, the rest of us don't get to be casual. Fritz had already checked the kitchen again, and reported no new trespasses. The nutmeg tin was untouched, the blades were precisely aligned, and the slip of paper with the cryptic diagram still sat in Wolfe's top drawer, right beneath the folded photograph. Dana had delivered. Wolfe had reread both at least 4 times that morning. That's 3 more than he usually allows a riddle before cracking it open. We hadn't heard from Hasse, Chen, or Simone since the last interviews. Dana had left us with one final name to explore: the woman Hasse had met with at the cafe, the one who passed him an envelope. A woman Wolfe suspected was not a friend or a romantic liaison, but a financier. The ghost client from the past. The woman who had ordered the original sketch and in the process tied all this nonsense together. So Wolfe did what he does best when the center gets murky. He widened the circle. At 10 o'clock, he called Saul Panzer. "Mr. Panzer," he said, over the intercom, "we are looking for a woman in a grey coat, mid-40s, discreet manner. Met with Mr. Hasse at Tilden's Cafe, on East 51st 2 evenings ago. I want her identified but not approached, discretion and speed." Saul's grunt meant he was already on the move before Wolfe finished his sentence. While Saul handled the discreet part, I was sent to make another run at Ren Chen. Wolfe suspected Chen was not entirely out of the loop, but rather orbiting something he couldn't explain yet, or didn't want to. Wolfe's instinct was that Chen wasn't guilty of orchestrating anything, but might be the one person whose hands had touched the real drawing between its theft and replication. So I took a walk over to the firm again, early enough that Simone was just pouring her second coffee. "Is Mr. Chen in?" I asked casually. "He's in the rendering studio," she said. "Came in early. Didn't say much. Mind if I drop in?" She gave me a sharp look. "If I say no, does that mean you'll sneak in through the window?" "Only if you're guarding the door," I said, grinning. She relented. Chen didn't look up as I entered. His desk was crowded with digital monitors, design sketches, and an unusually worn leather notebook, something that didn't match his usual precision. That's what caught my eye. "Morning," I said. He looked up, startled, and snapped the book shut. "Mr. Goodwin. Something new. Just wondering if you've remembered anything helpful about the replica, or the original." He stood, carefully placing the notebook in a drawer. "No," he said. "And if I had, I'm not sure I'd know it was helpful. Try me." He hesitated. "I think Bernard Morrow knew exactly what that design meant. And I think he left it for someone. Maybe not even Dana. Maybe someone else." "You think he planned for it to be found?" "I think he planned for it to be understood." Big difference. That wasn't nonsense. It was, in fact, exactly the kind of phrasing Wolfe would underline twice. Chen turned away, suddenly restless. I went back and looked at the archived file, he said. The blueprint copy, whoever replaced it, they weren't trying to fool us, they were trying to delay us. There are micro errors, line breaks, slight shifts, things a professional would notice, but only after wasting time. Which means, I said, the swap was meant to slow Dana down. Or you, Chen said. I left after that. No use pressing him further. Wolfe doesn't need confessions, just inconsistencies. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had laid out a scaled copy of the drawing on the desk. Bernard had redrawn it from memory, complete with the unusual deviations in spacing. Wolfe was circling something near the lower left corner. This, he said, as I entered, is the entry point. To what? To the real structure. You think it was built. I think it was started. That was news. You believe someone took the design and actually began construction. Yes. And then they stopped, or hid it. The question is whether what was started still exists. And whether it was ever meant to be a hotel at all. The intercom buzzed. Fritz answered, then sent Saul up. Saul entered with his usual casual confidence, and handed Wolfe a single sheet. Name's Althea Gerard, he said. Used to be a mid-level manager at a now-defunct real estate group called Behrman Strategic Holdings. They filed for bankruptcy in 1999 after a series of fraud investigations. Never charged. The company folded, but Miss Gerard was tied to at least 2 projects listed under shell names. One of them was called Hadrian Structures LLC. That name appears, Wolfe said, on the design ledger Bernard submitted with the drawing. Then it's her, Saul said. Yes, Wolfe replied. She's the one who commissioned the design, and now, she works in logistics, Saul said. Quiet life. Lives in Kips Bay. Rents. No large holdings, but she's visited the firm twice in the last month, using the rear entrance, and she met Haas, I added. Wolfe nodded. Then he's acting as her proxy again. We sat in silence for a moment. So what's next? I asked. We prepare the net, Wolfe said. He called Fritz in, and dictated 4 handwritten invitations, each one identical in tone. I request your presence for a discussion of the design in question and its implications. Your candor is expected. Your attendance is not optional. The name Gregory Haas, Ren Chen, Simone Kendrick, and Althea Gerard. You think they'll all come? I asked. They'll come, Wolfe said, because the truth is no longer hidden in the blueprint. It's walking the streets again, and every one of them knows it. We sent the notes by hand that evening. No mention of Bernard, no mention of Dana. Just Wolfe's signature, and the time 6:00 p.m. If sharp, 2 days hence. As the door shut behind Fritz, Wolfe stood, again. Twice in 2 days. The last time that happened, a Wall Street fraud collapsed before dessert. He walked to the window. We are not chasing a crime, he said. We are chasing a design. I waited, and he turned. But designs don't lie, Mr. Goodwin. People do. And this one, this structure, was made to look innocent. But it was drawn to deceive. The deception wasn't an accident. And now someone's trying to finish what was started. No, Wolfe said. They're trying to erase it, and us with it. That night, I double-checked the locks again. Because Wolfe was right. This wasn't about who had the sketch anymore. It was about who wanted it gone. It isn't every day. Nero Wolfe voluntarily rises twice in a 48-hour span, sends handwritten invitations to potential saboteurs, and lets me see his temper smolder just behind the brim of a teacup. But the design Bernard Morrow had resurrected, and the people swirling around it like dust over forgotten blueprints, had officially violated Wolfe's 3 cardinal rules. His routine, his brownstone, and his patience. As it turned out, That made him sharper, not louder. The day before the scheduled confrontation, Wolfe settled into his office with the calm of a man about to play his final move 4 turns early. He had me run interference, calls, errands, fact-checking, and one unannounced drop-in at Dana's firm to check for nervous twitches. Meanwhile, he orchestrated the lineup, not like a prosecutor, but like a choreographer. His chessboard was almost complete. He just needed everyone in position. At 10 o'clock Wolfe Saul Panzer returned with a second file on Althea Gerard. It was thinner than the first. No new movement, Saul said. No calls in or out, since the last visit with Haz. She hasn't contacted anyone else from the firm. Her accounts are clean. No financial shifts, Wolfe asked. Any indication she has retained counsel? None, Saul said. She's either confident or isolated. Or both, Wolfe replied. After Saul left, Wolfe handed me a list, 3 items. 1. Retrieve a second copy of the design from Bernard, but make sure it was hand-delivered, not couried. 2. Confirm Simone Kendrick's attendance at the meeting. And 3. Place a call to the building commissioner's office in Queens. Ask for the archive department, Wolfe said. Request all dormant permits submitted under the name Hadrian Structures LLC. Cross-check with anything tied to development between 1991 and 1994. You expect cooperation? No, Wolfe said. But your voice has persuasive qualities when laced with civic panic. I called. It worked. What we found was more telling than we expected. Between 1992 and 1993, a temporary foundation was poured at a nondescript waterfront plot in Long Island City, technically zoned for hotel development, but never completed. It sat untouched for 9 months, then was refiled under a different shell name, and quietly erased from municipal records when Hadrian Structures dissolved. What's there now? Wolfe asked. A maintenance depot, I said. City storage, fencing, salt bins. The kind of place people drive past without blinking. Wolfe looked pleased. Perfect. At noon, I visited Bernard. He was resting but alert. Dana had the sketch ready, his final redrawn version, clean lines, full layout, deviations marked in red. He's been remembering more, Dana said. He thinks there were signals embedded in the entryway columns. Structural codes tied to geographical coordinates. Coordinates for what? I asked. She hesitated. A vault, not a bank vault. A records vault. Some kind of data cache. Bernard stirred. They called it a depository, he muttered. Back then, before we knew what digital meant. Physical data, I said. Blueprints, documents? I don't know, he said. But the way they structured it, they weren't hiding money. They were hiding information, from someone important. Who? I asked. He looked at me with a kind of foggy sorrow. Everyone. I brought the drawing back to Wolfe, who studied it like a map written in another language. By mid-afternoon, he had settled into his chair with a fresh beer, and issued his next round of instructions. Mr. Goodwin, he said. You will contact Miss Gerard, personally. Yes. Call her and inform her that Mr. Haas has already confirmed her attendance tomorrow. Speak calmly. Suggest Wolfe already has what he needs, and she may find it advantageous to clarify her position before I do. And if she hangs up, she won't, Wolfe said. He was right. I called. Gerard answered. Cool, polished, precise. I understand, she said, after I introduced myself. I'll be there. I have no reason not to be. Which wasn't exactly innocent sounding, but it did sound confident. Back at the brownstone, Fritz was preparing the evening meal. Lamb with garlic rosemary glaze, in case Wolfe required fortification, after the next day's spectacle. He didn't show it, but I knew Wolfe was calculating variables the rest of us hadn't even named yet. He asked me to go over the room layout for the following evening. Standard configuration, I asked. No, he said. Add a second chair between the red and green armchairs. Place Miss Gerard there. Isolation treatment. Exactly. We will move from the peripheral to the central. They will turn on each other before they turn on me. And Dana, she will not attend. She has done enough. Her presence would dilute the interrogation. What about Bernard? Wolfe shook his head. Too fragile. And too central. He will be referenced, not relied upon. We finished preparations late. I filed the latest sketches, updated the suspect log, and set out name cards for the chairs. Wolfe asked for them to be color-coded. Not for visual aid, but as a method of spatial persuasion. Green for Ren Chen, yellow for Simone Kendrick, and red for Haas, gray for Gerard. When I asked why, he said simply, "Color informs posture. That's Nero Wolfe for you." The night passed without event. At 10 o'clock the next morning, the phone rang. Simone Kendrick. "I need to reschedule," she said. "Not possible," I told her. "This isn't a board meeting." There was a pause. Then, "Has something happened?" "You tell me." Another pause. Then she sighed. "Fine. I'll be there." Wolfe, listening on the other line, nodded once. She is on the edge. At 4 o'clock Saul returned again. "I visited the Long Island City site," he said. "City records show construction stopped mid-foundation. But there's still something down there. Original pilings, reinforced walls, sealed basement, still accessible." Wolfe asked. "With enough work," Saul said. "But here's the kicker. It's under lock by the Department of Municipal Logistics. And no one's requested access in 15 years, until last week." Wolfe's brow lifted. "Name." Application was filed by an entity called Belwyn Cooperative Holdings. I checked our earlier paperwork. That name appeared nowhere, which meant someone new had entered the game. "They know we're close," I said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "And tomorrow, they will try to outplay me." He rose again, 3 times in 3 days. This was now officially historic. He walked to the orchids. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes, sir." "Tomorrow, you will bring a recorder. Audio. I intend to be memorable." "Understood." He paused again, then added, "And keep a hand on Mr. Haas. If anyone breaks first, it will be him." "Because of guilt?" "No," Wolfe said. "Because of pressure. He does not fear exposure. He fears collapse. And he has built a tower of silence." He turned back toward his desk. "And towers, Mr. Goodwin, fall hard. If you've never seen Nero Wolfe host a gathering in his office, allow me to set the scene. It's not a cocktail party. It's not a press conference. And it's definitely not a forum for polite disagreement. It's a ritual. A ceremony of truth extraction, conducted with the precision of a brain surgeon, and the social grace of a battering ram made of Latin grammar and glare. The invitations had been clear. Arrival at 6 o'clock p.m. sharp. No substitutions, no excuses. By 5:45, the brownstone was silent. Wolfe had taken his seat in the oversized leather throne behind his desk, arms folded like a judge, waiting for the first cross-examination. The red, green, yellow and gray chairs were arranged in an arc across from him, precisely spaced, color-coded by personality. I sat off to the right, recorder tucked behind a stack of books and a fresh notebook in my lap. Fritz had brewed a large pot of coffee. No refreshments beyond that. Wolfe believed in psychological fasting during confrontation. No one should be comfortable enough to lie well. First to arrive was Simone Kendrick.
Just before the hour, hair pinned, folder clutched like a shield. She said nothing, as I took her coat and gestured to the yellow chair. She sat with her knees perfectly aligned, and her expression unreadable. Next came Ren Chen, crisp in his dark grey suit, eyes darting the room once before he sat in green. He didn't speak either. Gregory Haas entered at exactly 6:01, breathing heavier than normal, and holding his phone like it might rescue him, if he pressed the right button. He took the red seat with a grunt, and last Althea Girard. Impeccable, unbothered. She wore a charcoal coat, and a pale blue blouse that looked expensive without being flashy. She gave me a brief nod, and slid into the grey chair with silent precision. Wolfe waited until the room was still. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "I will begin. You may speak, but interruptions are ill-advised. You may lie, but it will be noticed. You may remain silent, but it will be interpreted." No one moved. "You are here because of a drawing," Wolfe continued. "A blueprint designed by Bernard Morrow in 1993 for a structure that was never built publicly. That drawing has since been copied, tampered with, and stolen. What remains is not a building but a puzzle, and I intend to complete it." He let the words hang, then turned to Haas. "Mr. Haas, you claim to have forgotten the details of the original sketch. That was untrue." Haas has shifted. "I didn't." "Enough," Wolfe said. "You viewed the design when Bernard left it in his office. You memorized its structure. When Miss Morrow retrieved it decades later, you were alarmed to learn it had resurfaced. I was concerned. You were frightened. Because you knew that the structure was more than ornamental. You remembered who commissioned it." All eyes turned to Girard. She did not flinch. "Althea Girard," Wolfe said. "You are the client who paid Bernard Morrow in cash, and requested the structure's design under the shell company, Hadrian Structures. You were then affiliated with Behrman Strategic Holdings, a firm dissolved under suspicion of fraud." She smiled faintly. "The design was a legal commission." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but the intended use was not." She leaned forward slightly. "You're suggesting what?" "I'm stating," Wolfe said, "that the building was a cover, a front for a depository, a vault beneath a proposed hotel site. The permits were filed, the foundation was laid, and then it was buried, forgotten, until Miss Morrow uncovered the drawing." "I have no knowledge of a vault," Girard said. Wolfe turned to Simone. "You received the replica drawing last month, Miss Kendrick." She blinked. "What? You did not steal it. But you facilitated its replacement. The original went missing between the cabinet and Miss Morrow's office. You were the only person with access to both." "I didn't, Miss Kendrick," Wolfe interrupted. "You believed you were protecting your employer, but in truth you were manipulated. Someone asked you to look the other way. Someone with history, with influence." He gestured toward Haas. Simone turned sharply. "Greg," Wolfe continued, "Mr. Haas convinced you that the drawing was dangerous, that Dana should not possess it." He framed his concern as professional, but he had already spoken to Miss Girard. He was working for her. Haas leaned forward, flushed. "I was trying to prevent a disaster." "No," Wolfe said. "You were trying to prevent discovery. You met with Miss Girard twice in the past month. She gave you instructions. You paid the drafting service to make the replica. You can't prove." "I don't need to," Wolfe said. "Mr. Panzer photographed your meeting, and the service confirmed your name, but that's irrelevant." He turned to Chen. "Mr. Chen, you suspected the drawing had value. You tried to reverse engineer it. I didn't. You did. And when you realized it contained embedded geometry, tied to a Fibonacci pattern, You began to understand its function. Chen stared, stunned. You found the deviation. You sketched it. And then you visited a print shop to create a version for your own study. You are not guilty of theft, but you are guilty of curiosity. That's not a crime. No, Wolfe said. But someone believed it was. That is why Bernard Morrow was pushed. Not because he held the truth, but because others feared it was about to spread. Wolfe now turned fully to Gerard. You returned because something has changed. Someone filed to reclaim access to the site in Long Island City. Not you directly, but your new shell company. I'm in logistics, she said coolly. No, you are in control. Wolfe tapped the desk. You orchestrated the drawing's removal, the message left in my kitchen, and the note sent to Miss Morrow. You were attempting to erase footprints. The structure beneath that site contains records, sensitive ones, names, transactions, materials. You had 30 years to forget it. Then Miss Morrow reopened the door. Gerard didn't blink. You have no legal standing. Correct, Wolfe said. I have moral leverage, and you now have an audience. She glanced at the others, measuring. Wolfe concluded. You will cease pursuit of the vault. You will not return to the firm. You will issue no further threats. If you do, I will send this summary, along with copies of the original sketch and permit records, to the New York Times and the district attorney's office. Gerard looked calm, but her silence cracked just slightly. Haas stood suddenly. I didn't push Bernard. I didn't. Wolfe raised a hand. You enabled the pressure. You activated the sequence. Whether you pushed or not is irrelevant. You lit the fuse. The room was still. Wolfe leaned back. This drawing was not a building. It was a blueprint for leverage. You each took part by design or neglect, in keeping it buried. That ends now. He stood 4 times in 4 days, if you're counting, and looked each one in the eye. You are dismissed. One by one they left. Simone was first. Quiet, shaken. Ren Chen nodded once in thanks. Haas avoided everyone's gaze. Gerard, the last, paused at the door. You could have asked for money, she said. I have plenty, Wolfe said. She left. Silence returned to the brownstone. Wolfe sat again and closed his eyes. Fritz, he called. Dinner. I shut the notebook, turned off the recorder, and leaned back. That was one hell of a gathering, I said. It was overdue, Wolfe murmured. We didn't speak again for 10 minutes. Outside a cab pulled away from the curb. Inside calm returned. The drawing had done its work. Now only the aftermath remained. The following morning, the brownstone was unusually quiet. Not calm, quiet, which is a different thing entirely. Calm is the sound of orchids in bloom, and Fritz humming while slicing fennel. Quiet is the sound of something unresolved, hanging just above your head, waiting to drop. Wolfe didn't emerge until after 10. When he did, he went straight to the office without breakfast, which put Fritz in a state of hushed concern, that he expressed by polished concern, that he expressed by polishing silverware, with more force than necessary. I followed Wolfe in. He didn't look up as I took my usual seat. They're all accounted for, I said. Chen called Simone, after leaving. She's spooked but quiet. Haas hasn't returned to the firm. Gerard flew out of LaGuardia this morning. Montreal, first class. No return, booked. She won't return, Wolfe said. Because she got the message. Because she got the message. Because she knows there's no structure left to protect. Only the idea of it. He gestured toward the desk, where a full printout of Bernard's redrawn design sat beside yesterday's notes. At the center was Wolfe's own copy of the 3 rectangles, 2 lines and 1 dot. The symbol that had appeared in our kitchen, in the envelope, and in the architectural spacing. Like a fingerprint. The vault, he said, tapping the dot.
It never existed as a thing. It was always a signal. A signal for what? A signal that something was finished, Wolfe said. That the information, whatever it was, had been moved. The design was just a relay. I nodded slowly. So Gerard didn't want to protect what was under that building. She wanted to erase the trail to where it went. Correct. And she failed. That was when Dana Morrow arrived. She came alone this time, wearing a navy coat, and the kind of expression that tells you the night before wasn't spent sleeping. Wolfe motioned for her to sit. She did. I read your summary, she said. Gregory hasn't responded to my texts. Simone took a personal day. Bernard. He's not ready for all of it. He doesn't need to be, Wolfe said. Then tell me, she said. What was all this about? Not just the drawing. The whole thing. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. It began with a commission, he said. Your father was hired to create the facade of a fictional hotel. The client, Althea Gerard, was acting on behalf of a financial entity looking to construct a credible permit filing, something that would pass casual inspection. Not to build, to mask an operation. Dana listened intently. The real project was underground. Wolfe continued. A data vault, not digital. Paper, blueprints, contracts, names. Likely evidence of money laundering or illegal construction deals from the early 90s. At the time the idea was clever. Bury the records under a legitimate-sounding development. If anyone looked, they'd see a paused hotel plan. Bureaucratic limbo. Dana nodded. And when the company folded, they left the site intact. Never finished. Never officially abandoned. Just dormant. Until your father's drawing resurfaced. She looked down. He didn't even remember it. No, Wolfe said. But someone else did. He recognized it. Realized what it implied. That's when he contacted Gerard. She had no idea it was still in existence. Its reappearance posed a threat, not because of what it showed, but because of what it might lead to. She sent him to retrieve it. He volunteered. Wolfe said. He has always followed power. But Gerard didn't trust him completely. So she also arranged to have it watched, hence the message in the kitchen. Someone entered to make sure we knew we were being followed, that our actions were not unnoticed. Dana inhaled sharply. I brought danger to your door. No, Wolfe said. You brought clarity. Gerard's mistake was thinking the sketch still mattered physically. It did not. What mattered was the possibility of connection. Once that line was drawn between the design and the old site, she had no choice but to neutralize the inquiry. Dana's eyes narrowed. She pushed my father. No, Wolfe said. Someone else did. Has didn't do it. Gerard wouldn't. But someone needed to make sure your father stopped talking. He looked at me. Mr. Goodwin. I flipped my notebook to a page I'd marked earlier. Security camera footage from Bernard's building was spotty. But one blurry frame shows a man entering the stairwell 20 minutes before Bernard fell. Frame enhancement suggests it was Randall Pike, the building manager. Dana blinked. I barely spoke to him. He was approached, Wolfe said, and paid to intervene if needed. No names. Just instructions. A threat. A shove. Nothing traceable. Dana was quiet. Wolfe continued. Gerard will not pursue further. Has will fall silent. Simone will eventually forgive herself. Chen will return to his work and forget this ever happened. But you, he looked at her directly. You must decide what to do with what you know. She didn't respond right away. Finally. You think I should bury it? No, Wolfe said. I think you should choose your truth carefully. That design was key. But the lock is already gone. Dana stood. Thank you, she said quietly. I think I'll go sit with my father for a while. Wolfe nodded. Do. She left the brownstone. Wolfe remained still for several minutes. Then he reached for a book, opened it to the middle, and slid the slip of paper, the strange geometric marking between the pages like a bookmark. Symbolism, he said. More to himself than to me. How we pretend structure has meaning. You think it didn't? No, Wolfe said. Just not the meaning they assigned it. I closed my notebook and stood. Dinner? Yes, Wolfe said. And tell Fritz I would like duck. With bitter greens. I paused at the door. You think Gerard's the last of it? Of that era, Wolfe said. Perhaps. And the vault? Long emptied, Wolfe replied. But not forgotten. I nodded and left him alone. Outside the city kept moving. Blueprints became buildings, buildings became rubble, and the rest of us kept pretending that lines on paper couldn't change the course of people's lives. But they can. Especially when drawn by someone who knew how to hide a truth beneath a curve. And Nero Wolfe, he just knew how to find it. The brownstone always has a particular sound after a case concludes. Not silence. Wolfe hates that. It's more of a return to balance. A quiet shuffle of footfalls on tile, the low clink of cutlery from the kitchen, and the rhythmic rustle of Wolfe's pages turning at a pace that means the world is at least temporarily tolerable again. After Dana left, Wolfe didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon. He stayed in his chair, book open, the thin geometric slip still lodged halfway through the binding, like a placeholder in a novel he already knew the ending to. The case was closed, but the residue hadn't faded. Not yet. I made myself scarce for a while, went for a walk around the block, called Saul to make sure Gerard's trail remained cool, checked on the site in Queens one more time, still quiet, still city sealed, no movement. I even rang Dana, just to hear her voice. She said Bernard was resting. She didn't sound like someone who needed further explanation. When I got back, Fritz had just plated dinner. Duck, bitter greens, roasted fennel. Wolfe had asked for it before we knew the dust would settle. His appetite has always been the closest thing to prophecy you'll find on this side of a séance. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the duck was perfect. Eventually, I leaned back and said, "It's funny, when you think about it." Wolfe raised an eyebrow, but didn't look up from his plate. All that noise, all that tension, and in the end, it wasn't about what was buried. It was about what they thought they could still control. That, Wolfe said, dabbing the corner of his mouth, is often the final mistake of powerful people. He stood, slowly, which made it official. The case was now fully over. No man stands from duck mid-meal, unless he's already satisfied. We moved to the office. I brought the remainder of my coffee. Wolfe poured himself a brandy, and eased into his chair, as if the cushions had missed him. I suppose Gerard gets away with it, I said, not exactly liking the taste of that thought. She gets away with what remains, Wolfe replied. Which is nothing. No records, no vault, no allies, only memory. Which fades. Yes, he said, but not as quickly as guilt. That hung in the air a moment. I flipped back through my notebook. Names, dates, sketches, quotes. Most of it wouldn't be needed again. Some of it never made sense outside the brownstone walls. I stopped at the first page, the morning Dana arrived. She never wanted this, I said. No, Wolfe agreed. But she endured it. That distinction matters. You think she'll talk? Eventually, Wolfe said. But not for attention. For understanding. And Bernard. Wolfe's gaze drifted toward the window. The evening light made the orchids glow, just enough to feel intentional. He remembers what he must. That is all one can ask of the past. I stared at the diagram again. 3 rectangles, 2 lines, a dot. It still feels unfinished. Wolfe smiled faintly. That is because you expect architecture to conclude, he said. But real design is perpetual. What matters is not the structure. It's the purpose it once served. A blueprint for secrecy. A frame to contain fear. And what do you call the kind of design that hides something that never existed? Art, Wolfe said simply. I laughed. You always find a philosophical wrap-up. I detest loose ends, Wolfe replied. Especially when they dangle with sentimental weight. He took another sip of brandy, then gestured toward the fireplace. You may burn the diagram. Really, it has served its purpose. I walked to the hearth, dropped the sketch in, and watched it catch. The paper curled, blackened, then disintegrated, the symbols vanishing in the flicker of orange. Back at my desk, I reached for my pen. What are you doing now? Wolfe asked. Making a note. For what? For the file. Wolfe grunted. There will be no file. There's always a file, I said. Even if it's just in my head. Wolfe sighed. Then keep it there. Let this one drift. I nodded. But I didn't close the notebook. Some things deserve to be remembered. Quietly. Without noise, or prosecution, or headlines. We peeled back the layers of something meant to remain sealed. A ghost structure, a fabricated front, a vault that never held gold, but held the kind of weight that shifts lives when uncovered. Names, histories, mistakes with long shadows. They had built something hollow, and we had revealed it without touching a single brick. The doorbell rang. Fritz answered, and returned moments later with nothing but a package. Brown paper, no return address. Inside a book. Wolfe opened it. An old architectural text, margins marked, a note inside the front cover. For your library. You see what others ignore. No name, no date. But I knew who sent it. Gerard, retreating with class. Wolfe tucked the book into the shelf without a word. Done? I asked. Yes. Completely. Wolfe finished his brandy. As much as anything ever is. He stood again, slowly, with finality. I turned off the lights. The orchid stood in bloom. The diagram was ash, and Wolfe at last returned to his chair with nothing left to say. The brownstone had returned to order, and dinner tomorrow, I was told, would be trout. Which in our world means justice had been served.